Hey everyone, welcome to Quantum Mind Hub Stories. Before we dive into this story, remember to drop your thoughts, perspectives, and lessons learned in the comments section below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel, and share it with friends who love a good story. Alright, grab a comfy seat and let's get started. Nora's days and nights blurred together as she dedicated every spare moment to caring for her husband Brian's ailing mother. In the quiet, pre-dawn hours of a restless suburban city, Nora moved like a ghost between the sterile corridors of the modest family home and the cramped, unadorned room where Brian's mother lay frail and fading. The hum of a distant metropolis seeped through the thin window panes, the muffled sounds of traffic and murmured conversations underscoring the isolation of her sacrifices. Every night at 3 a.m., she rose with unwavering commitment, preparing warm baths, tenderly cleaning the frail face of the woman who, in her final days, became both her duty and her lonely companion. The air reeked of disinfectant and sorrow as Nora carefully brushed tangled hair from fragile temples. Amid the soft glow of the bedside lamp, she whispered gentle assurances that the harsh realities of life might relent, if only for a moment. Yet behind the exhaustion in her eyes lay simmering resentment, an inner storm hinted at by the deep lines of worry now mapping her once bright face. Despite every sacrifice, a persistent, gnawing loneliness began to take root, as she silently questioned whether her selfless deeds were ever truly seen or appreciated by those who mattered most. Even as she braced herself against the pain of physical fatigue and emotional isolation, a quiet, ineffable determination emerged, one that would soon drive her to challenge the very foundations of her existence. In the early hours of another gray, rain-soaked morning, Nora's unwavering routine continued unabated. The city outside, a sprawling mosaic of concrete and neon, offered no solace or distraction from her endless tasks. Inside the dimly lit house, every movement felt both necessary and heart-wrenching. Nora spent long hours delicately tending to Brian's dying mother, her steady hands moving with clinical precision as she administered medicine, adjusted pillows, and soothed labored breaths. Every gesture was an act of love, one that, over time, became a heavy burden compressing her spirit beneath its relentless weight. It wasn't just the physical labor that wore her down, it was the invisibility of her sacrifice. With every meal prepared, every gentle caress, and every tear silently shed under the weight of duty, she felt increasingly invisible, as if her emotions were being muted by the unyielding pressures of expectation and despair. The sterile environment of the hospital-like room was punctuated only by the rhythmic beep of a machine and the soft murmur of her whispered conversations to the aging woman. In that cold, flickering light, Nora's dreams of a vibrant career and an independent future seemed to drift further away, replaced by a haunting acceptance of her current existence, a mere caretaker set adrift in a sea of apathy and unspoken resentment. Brian's presence in this turbulent chapter of Nora's life was as elusive as a shadow at dusk, present in body but nearly absent in spirit. While Nora poured every ounce of her care into tending his mother, Brian remained a tacit observer, offering only perfunctory nods and half-hearted thanks that evaporated in the silence of empty rooms. His indifference was a quiet betrayal that chipped away at the once familiar foundation of their marriage. Even as he left for work in the early morning rush or retreated to his study to escape the clamor of household chores, there was always an unspoken assumption that Nora's labor was not only expected but required, without any gratitude in return. The city around them buzzed with the excitement of opportunities and ambitions, yet within the confines of the modest home, time moved slower and hope withered like an unattended flower. Conversations between them were sparse and clipped, the warmth of genuine companionship replaced by a mutual resignation. Brian would occasionally flash a pained smile or mutter a curt remark when addressed, but never did his eyes or tone truly acknowledge the relentless devotion with which Nora fought the tide of suffering. The gulf between them widened subtly, her quiet perseverance a stark, unacknowledged contrast to his detached nonchalance. In a way, her sacrifices had become a canvas on which he painted his indifference. Each neglected detail a brushstroke in a portrait of marital disconnect that left her painfully alone in the midst of her devotion. The turning point came on the day Nora's own birthday passed unnoticed. In a city where celebrations of life were woven into the fabric of everyday bustle, coffee shop toasts, friendly banter in busy streets, her day had been swallowed by routine, leaving her personal milestones in the shadows of caregiving. As she shuffled through her duties, preparing another dose of medicine and carefully arranging a bouquet of wilted flowers on the bedside table, There was no song of happy birthday. No unexpected call, no small, heartfelt token of appreciation from Brian. The stark absence of even a simple, "Happy birthday, Nora," stung more deeply than any physical injury. In the quiet moments between tasks, when the echoes of the city's life beyond her front door surfaced in soft reminders of what might have been, she found herself wondering if any life she had left was meant to be hers. The silence of that day was punctuated by the deep-seated feeling that her sacrifices were not just unnoticed but actively taken for granted, as if her very existence had become invisible. It was a day of quiet, internal protests, a day when the reflection in the mirror didn't show a woman full of strength but one whose eyes were hollowed by neglect, a sacrifice so profound it had seemingly erased her own identity. The absence of celebration became a symbol of the imbalance that had been festering beneath the surface of their lives, a tangible reminder of a love that had long ceased to care for the giver. Late one somber evening, as the shadows lengthened across the worn-out floors of the family home, Nora's world cracked open with the sound of revelation. While tidying up after her nightly routine in the quiet corner of the house, she inadvertently overheard a conversation that would shatter her fragile trust. Hidden behind the closed door of Brian's study, fragments of laughter and casual banter from his phone call reached her ears. The words, light and nonchalant, cut through her like shards of ice. "She's just doing it to look good, she's no real help." Her breath hitched in shock as she pressed herself against the wall, every syllable of his voice etching a new betrayal into her heart. The laughter that followed was not just the sound of amusement but a bitter soundtrack to the realization that every sleepless night, every sacrifice, had been reduced to a mere performance for his benefit. In that split second, the weight of her neglected dreams and unspoken pain coalesced into a searing, private agony. The revelation was a brutal slap to her soul, one that denounced the authenticity of her love and the fairness of the life she had devoted to a relationship that seemed to thrive on deceit. The ordinary space of their home transformed into a theater of cruelty where her silent heroism was mocked and dismissed with careless, hurtful words. As the conversation faded into the background, the echo of his betrayal reverberated in every corner of her being, leaving her with an overwhelming sense of injustice and a burning determination to reclaim her dignity. The moment of betrayal played repeatedly in Nora's mind over the following days, a relentless refrain that intensified with every whispered memory. In the subsequent hours, as she carefully measured out medicine and wiped away the tears she refused to shed in front of Brian, the casual cruelty of his words gnawed at her soul. That night, while the city outside twinkled with indifferent lights, Nora sat alone at the kitchen table, her hands trembling as she revisited the painful audio in her mind. The casual dismissal of her tireless efforts resonated with an unexpected cruelty, a reminder that nothing she did truly mattered to him. The revelation was paradoxically both devastating and liberating. For the first time, it stripped away the veil of self-doubt that had clouded her vision and showed her the raw truth of the imbalance in their marriage. Her heart pounded with both fury and sorrow, anger that she had been deceived and a sorrow that her love had been met with mockery. With every retelling in her mind, a cold determination began to sprout, an almost imperceptible resolve to no longer let her sacrifices be trampled by his callous laughter. In that dimly lit room, as the echo of his words mingled with the sound of her own steady heartbeat, Nora silently vowed that her role as a selfless caregiver would no longer come at the expense of her own self-worth. The burden of betrayal grew too heavy to bear without expression, and slowly, like a dam bursting its banks, the suppressed emotions began to overwhelm Nora. Late one night, after ensuring that Brian's mother was settled into a peaceful, temporary slumber, she retreated to the solitude of her tiny, cluttered bedroom. In the privacy of that quiet retreat, she allowed herself to fully drown in the torrent of her emotions. The room, once a sanctuary of small comforts, now echoed with the pain of countless unmet expectations. Instead of a loud, outward scream, Nora's breakdown was a silent implosion. A series of trembling breaths, a clenched jaw, and eyes that brimmed with unexpressed grief. Every burst of suppressed frustration and overwhelming despair was a product of years spent denying herself the acknowledgement and understanding she so desperately craved. In this raw, unedited moment of vulnerability, Nora began to comprehend that the path to healing required acknowledging the depth of the injustice inflicted upon her soul. Though the tears fell quietly, not a single one was wasted. Each drop was a punctuation mark in the story of her suffering, a testimony to the life she had sacrificed and the love that had been so grievously misunderstood. Her heart, though battered, dared to hope that this breaking point might be the inception of reclaiming not only her dignity but the vibrant identity that had long been buried beneath the weight of endless sacrifice. In the aftermath of that devastating night, Nora found solace in an unexpected ritual, a simple act that would soon evolve into her lifeline. With trembling hands and a heart brimming with unspoken truths, she began to pour her innermost feelings into a modest journal. Each page became a canvas where her pain, hopes, and dreams were laid bare, unfiltered by the expectations of others. In those quiet moments of self-reflection, the scribbled words on paper, her silent diary of suffering and gradual awakening, spoke louder than any conversation she had endured in the sterile hallways of her home. The act of writing became both cathartic and transformative, allowing her to reclaim a part of herself that had been long denied. Not only did she chronicle her daily struggles and moments of despair, but she also began to articulate her silent protests against a system that rewarded indifference and cruelty. As the days passed, the journal filled with confessions, raw emotions, and the quiet defiance of a woman who was slowly piecing together the fragments of her shattered self-worth. This newfound habit soon pushed her to seek professional help, a decision that marked the beginning of her journey towards self-healing. At a discreet therapist's office tucked away in a bustling part of the city, Nora finally encountered someone who affirmed the unspoken truth that her tireless commitment was not a testament to love, but a cycle of emotional abuse that demanded recognition and change. In the safe confines of her therapist's warmly lit office, Nora discovered a mirror to her soul, a reflection of her pain, resilience, and the inner strength she had long underestimated. Dr. Alvarez, with measured empathy and compassionate insight, helped her untangle the complex web of emotions that had accumulated over months of silent sacrifice. "You're caught in an emotionally abusive cycle, Nora," he gently explained, his words both affirming and painful. In that moment, the rigorous self-doubt and incessant guilt that had defined her existence began to lose their grip. The therapy sessions emerged as a haven, a space where Nora was encouraged to confront the grim realities of her relationship without fear or judgment. As she recounted the endless nights of care, the unacknowledged birthdays, and the devastating moment of overhearing Brian's callous remarks, the therapist's nods and quiet reassurances stitched together a tapestry of understanding that had long been absent in her life. Through each session, she started learning to identify the subtle cues of emotional manipulation and the insidious ways in which her self-worth had been chipped away. The honest acknowledgement that she deserved better ignited a spark deep within, a spark that, if nurtured, promised to evolve into a roaring flame of self-empowerment. In the gentle cadence of those therapy sessions, Nora took the first courageous steps towards reclaiming her identity, understanding that the path to freedom lay not in further sacrifice, but in honoring herself as much as she had once honored another. When the day finally arrived that Brian's mother succumbed to her illness, the air in the house shifted from quiet resignation to turbulent revelation. Although the loss was cloaked in the sterile formality of a final goodbye, the true sting came not from the farewell itself, but from what followed. While sorting through the modest belongings left behind, Nora stumbled upon a crumpled envelope tucked away in a drawer, a forgotten will. With trembling fingers, she read the scant contents and discovered a damning detail: Brian's mother had left her absolutely nothing. The brief note that accompanied the will was icy in its precision, stating that Brian had conveyed her wishes, a message that rang with quiet cruelty. "You didn't deserve anything." The realization hurt as it confirmed the unsaid truth that Nora's years of tireless devotion had been rendered utterly meaningless. The symbolic weight of the document bore down on her, as if every neglected birthday, every sleepless night, was now a testament to her undervalued sacrifice. In the silent, oppressive air of that moment, the injustice was laid bare, and the fragments of her dignity began to crystallize into a resolute determination. The will was not just a legal formality, it was a final, brutal declaration of the imbalance in her life, a document that betrayed the one person who should have celebrated her unwavering support. As Nora clutched the paper to her chest, the loss morphed from sorrow into a catalyst for the transformation that was to come. The promise of a better future, free from unreciprocated love and unacknowledged valor, started to take shape in her mind, a dream as fragile yet as tenacious as the pages of her journal. The discovery of the will ignited a chain reaction of emotions that culminated in a fateful confrontation. Every slight, every moment of neglect coalesced into an inescapable certainty that Brian's indifference was not born of oversight but was a deliberate dismissal of her worth. On a somber evening that seemed to echo the chill of winter in her bones, Nora finally decided to confront him, her heart pounding with the muted rhythm of wrath and sorrow. The living room, dimly lit by the flickering television set and scattered reflections of city lights through the window, bore witness to the collision of truth and pretense. "How could you?" she demanded quietly yet fiercely, her voice trembling with controlled fury. Brian, caught off guard by the raw honesty in her tone, attempted to dismiss her protest with a casual shrug and empty platitudes. But Nora was relentless, her words cutting through the complacent haze that had enshrouded their marriage for too long. As she laid bare every sacrifice, every tear-stained night, and every whispered betrayal, her language was both a recounting of pain and a declaration of intent. The conversation escalated, the atmosphere charged with unspoken reckonings and desperate pleas for accountability. In that charged moment, as Nora's eyes burned with the combined might of sorrow and newfound defiance, she realized that this confrontation was not an end, but the beginning of a painful yet liberating journey towards reclaiming her dignity and forging a path away from the toxic cycle that had defined her recent years. Brian's response to the confrontation was an eerie echo of his long-established indifference, an effortless maneuver of gaslighting designed to erase the gravity of Nora's anguish. Sitting in an armchair that once symbolized comfort, he nonchalantly dismissed her hurt with a cold, disarming smile, as if her words were mere exaggerations of trivial inconveniences. "You're overreacting," he said, his tone light and dismissive, as if the truth of her lived experience was nothing more than an emotional exaggeration. The sound of his voice, so casual and unburdened by remorse, grated against the fragile hope that Nora had only just begun to nurture. Every dismissive quip and half-hearted attempt to brush off the evidence of his betrayal underscored the profound chasm that had widened between them. It was not just the words that cut deep, but the calculated ease with which he invalidated her feelings, as if her desperate, heart-worn revelations were nothing more than the meager complaints of someone too sensitive for their own good. In that painful moment of isolation, Nora recognized with brutal clarity that her partner was not the compassionate confidant she had once believed him to be. Instead, he had constructed a fortress of lies and indifference around his selfish desires. A fortress within which he could hide, safe in the comfort of his well-practiced justifications. As his dismissive tone resonated in the quiet room, Nora felt a decisive shift within herself, an awakening that demanded she refuse to accept a life where her emotions were trivialized and her sacrifices discounted. The seeds of independence and self-respect, long buried under layers of suppression, began to stir in earnest. Haunted by the relentless echoes of betrayal and the cold mockery of Brian's dismissals, Nora reached a point of irrevocable clarity. Over days that stretched into long, introspective nights, the weight of her accumulated pain finally compelled her to envision an existence beyond the suffocating confines of a life defined by others' expectations. She recalled moments when her laughter had once filled sunlit rooms, when her dreams hadn't been stifled by endless caregiving and silent sacrifices. Determined to reclaim that elusive sense of self, Nora began to chart the blueprint of her escape. It started with small acts of defiance, a hesitancy to respond immediately to Brian's trivial demands, a newfound interest in revisiting the ambitions of her past. Every tiny act was a quiet declaration of independence, a stepping stone towards reawakening the vibrant, creative woman she remembered herself to be. Even as doubts crept in like unwelcome shadows, the spark of hope she had ignited refused to be extinguished. In whispered conversations with her reflection, she resolved that her dreams were worth fighting for, dreams that lay beyond the confines of sleepless nights and self-denial. Nora's internal monologue grew steadily louder, a chorus of resolve that drowned out the remnants of gaslighting. Each passing day, though marked by the lingering ache of what had been lost, was also filled with the promise of what she could become. And so, with the quiet determination that comes only from facing one's deepest wounds, she set forth on a path not just of survival, but of rebirth. A journey that would eventually lead her to discover the true measure of her own strength. In the days that followed, Nora began to transition from a life mired in self-sacrifice to one brimming with cautious optimism. It was as if every moment previously spent in a haze of despair was now being rewoven into a tapestry of newfound self-respect and independence. The very act of making small, deliberate choices, like choosing to have a modest breakfast by herself or taking a solitary walk under the twilight, became revolutionary. With each step away from the oppressive weight of her old life, she reclaimed pieces of herself that had been lost to years of unnoticed labors. Slowly, she started reaching out to old friends, reconnecting with a community that had once known her as vibrant, creative, and full of promise. Her reawakening was not sudden, nor was it without setbacks. There were days when the haunting echoes of Brian's words threatened to drag her back into self-doubt. Yet, amidst the urban clamor of crowded streets and neon signs that blinked like beacons of possibility, Nora found solace in her newfound autonomy. Financially, she took tentative steps towards independence by accepting freelance projects. Small commissions that, though modest, instilled a fierce pride in her work and a tangible sense of accomplishment. Every client, every project, was a brick in the foundation of her new life. The creative spark that had been smothered by neglect was slowly fanned into a flame of ambition. In the quiet evenings, as she meticulously budgeted her modest savings and drafted plans for the future, Nora began to envision a life where she was the protagonist of her own story, a life defined by purpose rather than perpetual sacrifice. Emboldened by her small victories, Nora began to re-establish herself within her former professional sphere. The dusty shelves of her career, long neglected in favor of caregiving, were slowly cleared away in favor of bright, hopeful aspirations. Each freelance assignment was not merely a job, it was a reclaiming of her identity, a silent, defiant nod to the talented, creative soul she once was. With every delivered project and every appreciative email from a satisfied client, Nora's confidence grew. The urban landscape she now navigated, crisscrossed with bustling sidewalks, open-air cafes, and vibrant community art spaces, mirrored the vibrant ambition that stirred within her heart. As her small business began to flourish, she fondly recalled her earlier days when her words and ideas were dismissed, and replaced those memories with visions of possibility. Though the scars of betrayal still tinged her laughter with a touch of melancholy, she allowed herself to believe in the restorative power of time and perseverance. Reinvigorated by the realization that her worth was not defined solely by her sacrifices, Nora started attending creative workshops and networking events. Slowly, she built a supportive circle of friends and mentors, each helping her to piece together the narrative of a woman who had triumphed over neglect. Through it all, the city, with its pulsating rhythms and hidden corners, became both a source of inspiration and a silent witness to her personal renaissance. Every street corner echoed with the promise of renewal, reinforcing Nora's belief that every ending sowed the seeds of a new beginning. With a resolute heart and a freshly minted identity, Nora found solace in the written word, a medium through which she could bear witness to the tumult and triumph of her journey. The pages of her journal, once filled only with private, painful recollections, evolved into a chronicle of raw emotion, determination, and eventual liberation. She meticulously recorded not only the bitter moments of betrayal and despair but also the small victories that symbolized the rebirth of her spirit. These written confessions captured the evolution of a woman who had been pushed to the brink of emotional collapse only to emerge with a fierce commitment to self-worth. Nora's daily entries evolved into a therapeutic ritual. Each sentence marked a step away from the past and a bold stride toward a future where her dreams were no longer secondary to another's convenience. In the gentle hum of her small apartment, with the city lights shimmering through the window, she began composing an exit letter. A final, unvarnished declaration of the life she had endured and the life she intended to build. The letter wasn't merely a goodbye to a toxic relationship, it was a manifesto of self-respect, a testament to the fact that her immense sacrifices had not been in vain but had laid the groundwork for a revitalized existence. With every word etched in ink, Nora reclaimed a piece of the identity that had been so ruthlessly suppressed. The pages of her journal soon transformed into a beacon of hope, urging others who found themselves ensnared in cycles of neglect to find their own voices and to trust that even the most bruised hearts could learn to beat with renewed passion. As the final moments of her turbulent chapter approached, Nora found strength in crafting what she called the exit letter, a poignant farewell that encapsulated the pain, love, and ultimate liberation that had defined her recent years. In that long, solitary night when the city slumbered under a quilt of darkness, she sat at her modest desk, pouring every ounce of bitterness, betrayal, and long-forgotten hope into the carefully chosen words. The letter was both a curse on the cruelty she had endured and a benediction for the new life that awaited her. "I gave you everything, and you returned only lies," she wrote in a trembling yet resolute hand, each letter a monument to the countless nights spent battling inner demons. Through the rhythm of her pen and the scratch of paper, She transmuted years of pain into a cathartic declaration of independence. This letter was not meant to wound for the sake of vengeance, but to signal the end of her servitude to a man incapable of recognizing true value, a final severance of the toxic ties that had bound her spirit for far too long. Every line was a step towards reclaiming a destiny that once seemed lost, a deliberate act of rebellion against the narrative that had stolen her light. As she sealed the envelope with a quiet finality, the exit letter became a tangible symbol of her resolve, a promise to herself that she would no longer be defined by sacrifice. With the first light of dawn creeping through her window, Nora prepared to leave behind the remnants of a past steeped in neglect, ready to step boldly into a future of self-made triumph. In the early hours of a cool, pale morning, while the world outside still lingered in the fragile embrace of sleep, Nora made her final, resolute exit. With her carefully penned exit letter clutched tight in one hand and her journal, a vessel of her reborn dreams, in the other, she tiptoed past the darkened hallways of the home that had once been her prison. Every step she took resonated with the echoes of 1,000 unsaid goodbyes, yet it was marked by a new, hopeful cadence that heralded the beginning of her emancipation. As she moved through the silent apartment, memories of laughter, tears, and years of silent sacrifice clung to the corners like shadows, but with each stride, they receded further into the past. Brian lay asleep, oblivious to the monumental decision unfolding within the quiet night. Nora paused at the threshold, the weight of the exit letter a palpable testament to her newfound self-worth and unshackled destiny. In that charged moment, as the soft hush of the city's slumber wrapped around her, she felt a mix of bittersweet farewell and triumphant liberation. The street outside, dusted with a faint glow from street lamps and the early hints of dawn, symbolized a world reborn, a world where her struggles would transform into fuel for a brighter, unburdened future. With one final, resolute glance back at the life she was leaving behind, Nora stepped into the uncertain promise of a new day, her heart beating a fierce, unyielding rhythm that declared her right to choose happiness over habitual sacrifice. Months later, the passage of time had softened the sharp edges of her past, but it had not dulled the brilliance of her reinvention. Nora emerged as a renewed force in her urban community, a woman with unbreakable resolve whose once dim spirit now shone with an unmistakable light. She cultivated a modest but thriving freelance career, channeling her deep well of creativity into storytelling, art, and words that resonated with many who had felt unseen or unappreciated. The vibrant city that had witnessed her darkest days now played host to her triumphant resurgence. Bustling cafes, art galleries, and lively street festivals became the backdrop to a new life built on principles of self-respect and creative freedom. Friends, both old and newly made, rallied around her like a supportive embrace, each interaction affirming that her decision to leave behind a toxic past had paved the way for genuine connections and vibrant opportunities. Nora's transformation was not just personal, it became a movement, a quiet rebellion against the societal pressures that had once dictated her self-worth. Her story, steeped in both struggle and success, began to circulate on social media, spreading through blogs, video essays, and heartfelt testimonial posts. In countless messages of support and shared experiences, her journey touched hearts, inspiring others to reflect on their own battles with neglect and emotional abuse. In the reflective glow of evening, as she sipped coffee by a large, rain-speckled window overlooking the city, Nora allowed herself to smile, a smile that was no longer tinged with sadness but illuminated by the power of renewal. Her quiet victory was a testament to the truth that even the most wounded hearts can discover strength and beauty after the storm. In the final chapter of her rebirth, Nora's voice became a rallying cry for anyone who had ever felt diminished by neglect and betrayal. Her viral blog post, boldly titled, "What I Learned After Caring for the Woman Who Thought I Wasn't Good Enough," resonated across digital platforms and in the hearts of millions who had experienced similar pain. In that post, she recounted every agonizing and hopeful moment, the lonely late nights, the shattering betrayal, the delicate journey of self-forgiveness, and the triumphant emergence of a woman who had reclaimed her identity against all odds. With clear, heartfelt language and a raw, unfiltered honesty, her narrative invited viewers to see themselves in her story, to share in the lessons of loss, recovery, and the ultimate power of self-love. As thousands of comments, shares, and likes poured in, Nora's message became a call to action, a reminder to cherish oneself and to never allow another to diminish the light within. In closing, she encouraged every reader, viewer, and listener to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share with friends, and comment their perspectives or key lessons learned from her journey. Her story, once one of quiet despair, had transformed into an anthem for hope and empowerment, a viral, resonant reminder that every heart, no matter how battered, deserves to beat with pride and passion.